All right, hello. So today I'm with Miss Muscos, who's a kindergarten bilingual teacher at Franz Elementary School. So just to start off, how long have you been teaching?
I have been teaching 16 years.
And in a bilingual classroom?
In a bilingual classroom, I did half of the time in pre-kindergarten, and then I switched to kindergarten.
Okay, great. So in your classroom, what type of motivation do you see the most among your students?
I see that I have to motivate them a lot because we have two languages. I have noticed that when we are doing English, I have to find different ways, singing, dancing, moving, hand movements, TPRI, to get them engaged.
And so how does that influence your lesson planning?
Well, when I write my lesson plannings, I make sure I find activities that are going to keep them interested in the learning. I add songs, I add hand movements, actions to keep them engaged.
Okay. So, do you think that there's a correlation between the potential that a student has for learning languages and language learning?
I believe that every student has a potential for language learning. I just feel that sometimes we have to inspire them a lot at school because what we see as a benefit from learning a second language is not what the parents see at home. So it requires a lot of support and motivation at school.
Okay. And what strategies do you use to help your students work on grammar?
To work on grammar, I do modeling. The way I talk, I try to speak slowly. I try to model how to speak the right way without telling them this is not what you do it. I just model the right way. I use stems sentences
Okay.
to prompt them to talk the right way.
Okay. So, how do you ensure that your students are receiving comprehensible input?
I make sure I have visuals in my classroom. Like I said, action, TPRI. I teach vocabulary, trying to connect a movement with a word. And when I check, it truly works. It's really, really helpful.
Good. Okay. So, how do you decide what is like a sufficient quantity of input for your students?
It depends on how the feedback I get from them, how they respond to the learning. Like right now with my class, I had to slow down very much what I'm doing and break it in small pieces. And in that, until they feel that they are confident with that, I don't move on to the next step.
Okay. And how does extra linguistic information, such as your gestures, your visuals, and facial expressions, aid in your students' acquisition?
That is a major part. I believe that without that, you lose their contact. Like I said, with this class, I'm doing movement, actions, faces, and it helps so much on top of the visuals and pictures and drawings and anything I can use to make the connection between the language and what they're learning.
Okay. And do you feel that it's easier for children to learn a second language?
I am a strongly believer in bilingual education, and I wish everybody could be bilingual. I think your brain broadens a lot when you are bilingual, and yes, I think it enhances learning a lot.
Okay. And what do you find that your students struggle with in English?
Sometimes sounds, the way we teach, the reading, we try to transfer sounds. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes the syntax in the sentence is kind of backwards. So they tend to do that. But with modeling and practice, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. And how does this, or how does being able to speak a second language influence your ability to help your students?
Oh, it gives me a wider range of knowledge, of words, of understanding the culture, and all of that supports
Okay.
that I understand the kids and their
Yeah.
families.
And lastly, how does your students' first language influence their learning rate in English?
A student that has a strong knowledge of their home language tends to succeed better than a student that lacks a strong language at home. And by that I mean lack of vocabulary, the way they speak, all of that influence how fast they acquire the second language and how fast they transfer everything they know into the second language. So it does make a big difference.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you so much for interviewing me.